What's up, guys? I recently made a video on the science of UFOs as explained by Michio Kaku. He's a modern physicist, if you will. In this video, I want to take a different approach and really go through Jacques Vallée. Jacques Vallée's views on it. He's a prominent and very long-standing ufologist in the subject. He wrote a very interesting paper back in 2003 with Eric Davis. Dr. Eric Davis, you may have seen his name on many other studies. He was recently in the Wilson memo. So Eric Davis was supposedly the scientist who asked the Admiral Wilson. That's the Wilson memo. He's also been involved in many other studies. So interesting article from him and Valle. Let's go through and check it out. I learned a ton from this article. Chris Lato, welcome to Lato Files. Okay, the actual name of the paper is Incommensurability, Orthodoxy, and the Physics of High Strangeness, a 6-layer model for anomalous phenomena. Yes, I realize that is a mouthful, a lot of stuff there. We'll go through each of these points, very interesting points. I learned something from each one of them, actually. Thanks to Space Beach, one of our moderators on the UAP Society Discord. Smash that like button if you do like this content and subscribe for future videos. Abstract. So the main argument presented in this paper is that the continuing study of unidentified aerial phenomena may offer an existence theorem for new models of physical reality. This is very exciting to me, just this first sentence. The current SETI paradigm and its assumption of mediocrity place restrictions on forms of non-human intelligence that may be researched. So he argues in this paper that the current SETI paradigm, really of orthodox SETI, is what they call it, is the assumption of mediocrity places restrictions on us that we're not going to be able to get there from here. Okay, we're putting too many biases, too many restrictions on it. A similar bias exists in the ufologist often stated hypothesis that UAP, if real, must represent space visitors. So Valle is saying that UAP or ufologists have the same issue, right? They're putting extensive biases or restrictions on their own search. Observing that both models are biased by anthropomorphism, the authors attempt to clarify the issues surrounding high strangeness observations by distinguishing 6 layers of information that can be derived from UAP events. Okay, so Valle and Davis are arguing here that both the SETI, one way to look for life, and UAPs, where they're saying that UAPs exist, both ends of these investigations are flawed, okay, by anthropomorphic bias. That's what he's saying. They attempt to clarify the issues by coming up with this other way, these 6 layers of how they can actually identify and derive information from UAP events. So it's basically a process, a way forward that we can gain more information from UAP events. He's arguing that SETI is not getting the whole picture, obviously, and then the UAP focused, the ufologists approaching it from a high strangeness angle are also not getting the same angles. In a further step, they propose a framework for scientific analysis of unidentified aerial phenomena that takes into account the incommensurability problem. I'll describe it later, but the incommensurability problem is basically just that aliens or extraterrestrial life, whatever it is, the phenomena will be so different from us that we simply cannot interact with them. We won't know how to communicate with them. That's basically what he's talking about there. Okay, so what's interesting here is this is based on a presentation at the Forum on Science, Religion, and Consciousness at the University Fernando Pessoa, Portugal. So it's in Portugal. I live in Portugal. Interesting. Jacques Vallée has a PhD in computer science. Eric Davis holds a PhD in physics. Both are consulting members of the National Institute for Discovery Science, Las Vegas. So this is from 2003, okay, 20 years ago. But reading through it, man, it doesn't feel like we've made any real progress. I think all of these points all stand that he's talking about. The challenge of high strangeness, I would call this woo, okay? High strangeness, what are we talking about? Woo. Things that you think are so crazy, absurd, that you think of it as some woo thing that can't possibly be true, and I just don't want to think about it and avoid it. Okay, that's like the nuts and bolts guys, right? That's high strangeness. So let's talk about it, the challenge of it. The rational study of reported cases of UAP is currently at an impasse. I argue it's still at an impasse. Okay, we're still at an impasse. This situation has as much to do with the incomplete state of our models of physical reality as it does with the complexity of the data. So he says it right there. The reason we are totally left in the dark, right? We can't move forward, is our models of physical reality are outdated, essentially, incomplete. They're incomplete. And we show that in future episodes. And the complexity of the data. The data is very complex. A primary objection to the reality of UAPs among scientists is that witnesses consistently report objects whose seemingly observed behavior cannot possibly be related to actual phenomena, even under extreme conditions. So that's it. The problem with high strangeness is that it's so strange is that it can't possibly be true. Okay, so it's too woo. It can't be related to actual phenomena, even under extreme conditions. That's it. Can't be true. It's so crazy. Skeptics insist that intelligent extraterrestrial visitors, ETI, simply would not perpetrate such antics as are reported in the literature. So that skeptics say it's too crazy. Why would they do that? If it's an advanced alien civilization, why would they come and do all these ridiculous things to humans? You know, why are the abduction cases so weird and crazy and interesting? Okay. Nonetheless, the high strangeness of many reports must be acknowledged. So Valle argues, and I totally agree, is we can't just throw out the woo. Okay, you have to accept the woo is there, so you have to address it. Okay, just saying I don't want to listen to the woo, I'm not going to address it. You're missing the whole point, man. You're limiting your possible solutions. Advocates of UAP reality, on the other hand, generally claim that the extraterrestrial hypothesis, ETH, centered on interstellar travelers from extrasolar systems visiting the Earth is most likely explanation for the objects and entities associated with them. Okay, so Valle says here, advocates of the UAP reality, on the other hand, they claim it has to be visitors from other star systems. Okay, Valle says this argument too can be challenged on the basis of the witness's own testimony. Ufologists have consistently ignored or minimized reports of seemingly absurd UAP behaviors that contradict the extraterrestrial hypothesis by selectively extracting data that best fits their agenda or version of the hypothesis. Thus, the ETH, extraterrestrial hypothesis, just like the skeptical argument, is based on anthropocentric self-selection. He said that 13 years earlier, in 1990. Here we are witnessing an interesting overlap between the SETI and UAP paradigms. Each excludes consideration of the other when laying claim to the legitimate search for and contact with potential non-human intelligence. So what does that mean? SETI, or Orthodox SETI in this case, as we'll talk to in a second, does not consider the woo as anything possible. It's not even in their possible solution set, right? And Valle argues the same is true here for the UAP reality supporters, okay? Those that say that it has to be an extraterrestrial civilization, okay? So he says they're equally wrong, okay? They are also limiting possible solutions by just biasing onto one. They already know the answer is what it comes down to, okay? Very interesting. He argues here, this is why continuing study of reported UAP events is important. It may provide us with an existence theorem for new models of physical reality. In the view of the authors, current hypotheses are not strange enough to explain the facts of the phenomenon, and the debate suffers from a lack of scientific information. Okay, so Valle makes an amazing point here. I think totally agree with him, is that humans are limiting our options of the solution, right? On all fronts, okay? Basically, we're all biased, and we have to take this into account. So if you're following Orthodox SETI, you think we haven't detected any signals from space, then we're alone in the universe. If you're a UAP reality supporter, most likely you think that it's extraterrestrials. Like it has to be aliens. I get comments on both sides all the time. Okay, it has to be aliens. How can you not understand it's aliens? I'm telling you right here, that's a bias. And Valle that's what he says. Same reason SETI is probably wrong as well. So he says, this is why we need to continue. This is why continuing study of reported UAP events is important. It may provide us with an existence theorem for new models of physical reality. So what he's saying here, and I completely 100% agree, is that what UAP has highlighted, certainly highlighted to me in my own paradigm of the universe or world, is that we know very, very little compared to what we think we know. Okay, we think we know so much about the universe, that all of our assumptions and laws are correct, but we've been around so small a time frame. We know basically nothing Okay, so by continuing the study of UAP events, we can get data to provide us with an existence theorem. But if we just avoid the woo, then we're never going to find it. Okay, so that's what he's saying here. Thus, it is now widely acknowledged that the nature of our universe is far more complex than observations based on anthropocentric self-selection portend. In this respect, ufologists and SETI researchers appear to be fighting a rearguard battle. Both suffer from identical limitations in the worldview they bring to their own domains and to their antagonism. Okay, basically, everyone is biased, and both of these fronts are not listening to the other fronts, okay? So we could all stand to be more open-minded and think about actual scientific results. Science it doesn't care if it's strange, right? It doesn't matter if it's strange, is it reproducible? So let's look at the actual biases, okay? He goes through here in the next section. The SETI orthodox view of interstellar communication assumes the assumption of mediocrity. Okay, so the SETI orthodox view, I went up and looked this up. Dysonian approach to SETI, a fruitful middle ground. This is an article in the Journal of British Interplanetary Society in May 2011. Okay, I really enjoyed it. They talk about SETI, okay, and realize SETI hasn't gotten really any results in 40 years. So 4 decades, all right? Remember that. So beginning with the pioneering work of Frank Drake, I'm assuming Drake equation, Carl Sagan, Philip Morrison, Michael Papagiannis, Iosif Shklovsky, Bernard Oliver, and others. Okay, orthodox SETI has emerged. In a simplified form, it can be summarized as follows. Okay, so this is orthodox SETI. It argues life is common in the universe. Emergence of intelligence and technology is, if not necessary, then at least a typical outcome of biological evolution throughout the Milky Way. A sizable fraction of technologically advanced species seek to communicate with other intelligent creatures. It makes sense to listen for intentional radio-optical messages from the depths of space and to transmit messages in return. It makes no sense to travel across interstellar distances or to expect such interstellar visitors. The best that we can hope for is a slow and benign exchange of messages. The greatest beneficiaries in such exchanges being the youngest newcomers to the galactic club, including us humans. Okay, so if you read it there, I think now, after 40 years of looking, it seems pretty naive, right? For one thing, there's a lot of assumptions in there. It makes sense to listen for intentional radio or optical messages. Okay, that makes sense, from the depths of space. But it also says it makes sense to transmit those messages back in return. It also says it makes no sense to travel across interstellar distances or to expect such interstellar visitors, right? I think 2 of these claims, I think we can say, appear pretty naive at these points, okay? But this is orthodox SETI. This paper actually proposes Dysonian SETI, okay? So this is a new advanced thing kind of mentioned in the article here by Valle, is they want to open up their minds, okay? So basically, it's like SETI 2.0 is what they're talking about, and it sounds like nothing is really taken hold until maybe very recently. But for Dysonian SETI, they want to search for artifacts, so like the Dyson sphere, that's really where it came from. Dyson sphere, the study of post-biological, okay, so this is going to be post-biological and artificially super-intelligent evolutionary trajectories, okay? The expansion of admissible SETI target spectrum, the achievement of tighter interdisciplinary contact with the related astrobiological subfields. What does this mean? Basically, is they just want to open up their minds to not just going with radio waves and microwaves. That's it. So we'll look at all these other things as well, okay? So we can talk about that in a future, but let's get back to this. So that's the orthodox SETI view. The assumption of mediocrity is that life is all over the place and we're no more special than anyone else or less special. All right, this approach was predicated on the notion that it was economically cheaper and technologically easier to generate and receive radio wave photons for interstellar signaling rather than engage manned interstellar travel or robotic probes. Indeed, the latter was considered economically and technologically improbable within the SETI orthodox view. Okay, so this is the prevailing view over my whole lifetime, right, which I don't agree with anymore, is that the universe is just too big, it's too far away, and we can only travel at the speed of light. And I think you'll see here why that may not be the best view, okay? This has led to 4 decades of the SETI program following a dominantly radio microwave-oriented search scheme. Given the failure of this initial approach in the last 2 decades, alternative SETI programs have been proposed. They exploit coherent laser optical IR, holographic signals, World Wide Web detection schemes, as well as ideas to search for ETI artifacts. SETI, or astroarchaeology, and visiting probes, SETV, right? Visitation in the solar system or on Earth. Okay, so Valle does say that they're opening up the scope, okay? Basically, they're looking outside of their very focused radio microwave, but based on what I saw, they haven't looked very much, okay? These new programs have been at odds with members of the dominant radio microwave SETI program, possibly because of concern over having to share scarce resources or compete. All right, so that's basically SETI. So he says they really haven't gotten anywhere, and they still haven't, right? So this 20 years later, SETI, from my understanding, at least my knowledge, hasn't found anything. Now he goes to the UAP, okay? The community of UAP researchers is also driven by its own orthodoxy, which is only violated at great personal risk to the critic who proposes a deviant view, and by its own principle of mediocrity when attempting to categorize and hypothesize explanations for the phenomena. So what is he saying here is the UAP community, ufology community, has its own very orthodoxy, okay? And they're not wanting to change that. They have the same issues, right? It's people on both sides is what he's saying. So if you bring up any deviant view, you're basically going to get attacked. I think we've all seen that. For this reason, we prefer to use the term UAP rather than the more common UFO, which is immediately associated with the idea of space visitors in the mind of the public and media. So Valle as well agreed with using the term UAP, which really gets it away from that flying saucer mentality word, the stigma, essentially. But now he brings up a very important point here that I have yet to really fully understand. So see if you can help me out with this, guys. Tell me in the comments if you understand what this comment is, because I think it's very important. Okay, this bolded section right here. Okay, so let's see. Yet a bridge could be formed between the disparate SETI and ufology communities if both would only recognize a simple fact. So this is what Valle says. We'll unify and better organize our UAP studies, if you will. If the SETI and UAP reality proponents can realize this simple fact, he says, simple fact. No experiment can distinguish between phenomena manifested by visiting interstellar, arbitrarily advanced ETI, and intelligent entities that may exist near Earth within a parallel universe or in different dimensions, or who are terrestrial time travelers. Okay, so a lot of words there, but let's see. He says, no experiment can distinguish between phenomena manifested by extraterrestrial civilizations, okay, or intelligent entities that exist near Earth in a parallel different dimensions, or who are terrestrial time travelers. Okay, you cannot tell is what he's saying. There is no experiment that can distinguish between visiting aliens, between intelligent entities that may exist near Earth, like within a parallel universe. You can't tell if it's an entity from a different dimension, and you can't tell if they're time travelers from our own Earth. Okay, so basically he's saying no experiment can tell us any of these things. So tell me if you know in the comments what the ramifications of that are, because I haven't been able to come up with it. All right, each of these interesting possibilities can be manifested via the application of the physical principle of traversable wormholes, since they theoretically connect between two different universes, two remote space locations, different times and dimensions. Okay, so this is from Davis. So Dr. Eric Davis, 2001. Basically what they're saying is the reason you can't discern, no experiment can discern between any of these things, is because we physically believe traversable wormholes exist, or they're at least theoretically possible with our current math. Okay, so that means that these time distances, or time, distance, universe, dimension, all kind of lose their specific borders and kind of blend together. Okay, so that's what he's saying there. All right, this leads the present authors to speculate that a new synthesis can be found by examining the full context of the UAP phenomena, including its apparently absurd characteristics in terms of a 6-layer model. The model uses the framework of the incommensurability problem and concepts borrowed from semiotics. Okay, so I kind of a little bit described the incommensurability problem. He goes through kind of a very good point here. I've brought this up many times before. He says here, in any scientific question, it must be possible to ascertain to what extent a hypothesis, when tested and proven to be true, actually explains the observed facts. In the case of UAP, however, as in physics generally, a hypothesis may well be proven true, while an apparently contradictory hypothesis is also proven true. Okay, so it's really, what is the question? What's the question you're asking? Because you can get different answers, verifiably correct answers to different questions, right? But it doesn't mean you're explaining the actual problem. Look at this. Thus, the hypothesis that the phenomenon of light is caused by particles is true. But so is the opposite hypothesis, that it is caused by waves. We must be prepared for the time when we will be in a position to formulate scientific hypothesis for UAP, and then we may face a similar situation. But basically, we're not asking the correct questions, okay? If you're asking, is light a particle or is light a wave, from our current understanding, the answer is yes, okay? But can it be both? How can it be both? I think we're just asking the wrong question. If you think about it, is that thing you're leaning on right now, is it a table or is it a desk? The answer is yes, right? Well, if you're leaning on a table, okay, it can be described as a table, but if it happens to have things inside of it, opens doors, however you define those two things, it can be the same thing, right? But it's not really the same thing, is it? The framework we present here is based on such an apparent contradiction because we will argue that UAP can be thought of as both physical and as psychic. So what he's saying is UAP can be both. They can be both at the same time, right? Just like light can be a particle and light can be a wave, UAPs could be something physical and something psychic at the same time. So if you're going to ask, are UAPs physical or are UAPs psychic? The answer could be yes. It could be yes, both. So here's the 6 layers of UAP analysis. Let us consider the characteristics of the sightings that are not explained by trivial natural causes. Okay, so he's saying let's focus on the real ones, okay? The real events. And we go here, layer 1. So what can we find out? Pretty interesting. Layer 1 is the physical layer. So evident in most accounts describing an object. So the object occupies a position in space, moves as time passes, interacts with the environment through thermal effects, gives rise to photographic images. Okay, so this list right here is basically the list of physical characteristics, right? So that's layer 1. Thus, UAP, in a basic physical sense, are consistent with a technology centered on a craft that appears to be using a revolutionary propulsion system. So that's just it, layer 1, okay? That's the nuts and bolts. This is what people want from nuts and bolts, okay? Layer 6, probably the other end. That's what people want from the woo end, okay? But let's look at it. He's saying there's 6 things that we can differentiate. Layer 2. For lack of an adequate term, we will call the second layer antiphysical. The variables are the same as those in the previous category, but they form patterns that conflict with those predicted by modern physics. Okay, so layer 2 is basically the physical events that we see, but they defy all of our current physics. Okay, they're all the weird stuff. So he mentions here sinking into the ground, shrinking in size, growing larger, changing shape, becoming fuzzy or transparent, dividing into 2 or more craft, several of them merging into one object at slow speed, disappearing at one point and appearing somewhere else instantaneously, remaining observable visually while not detected by radar, okay, so multispectral, producing missing time or time dilation, producing topological inversion or space dilatation, appearing as balls of colored, intensely bright light under intelligent control. So that would be like a layer 2, okay? So you're not actually seeing the craft, you're seeing some weird anti-physical presentation of the craft, okay? Let's go layer 3. The third layer has to do with the psychology of the witnesses and the social conditions that surround them. This is an interesting one. There's no list here. Human observers tend to see UAP while in their normal environment and in normal social groupings. They perceive the objects as non-conventional, but they try to explain them away as common occurrences until faced with the inescapable conclusion the object is truly unknown. So this is the psychology of the witnesses and the social conditions that surround them. So that's layer 3. Not really sure how it plays in. Let me know in the comments if you have a better idea. Layer 4, physiological reactions are another significant layer of information. Okay, so I would think of this as biological effects. So this is like layer 4 in there. What are the actual effects? So we have sounds. Okay, what can humans feel and hear, right? Vibrations, burns, partial paralysis, extreme heat or cold, odors, metallic taste, pricklings. I don't know what that is. Temporary blindness when exposed to the object's light, nausea, bloody nose or ears, severe headache, difficulty breathing, loss of volition, drowsiness in the days following a close encounter. So we've actually seen even more effects of this, okay? I would say brain damage is one of them. All right, layer 5. Now, starting to get into the psychic stuff. The 5th category of effects can only be labeled psychic because it involves a class of phenomena commonly found in the literature of parapsychology, such as impressions of communication without a direct sensory channel, so telekinesis, poltergeist phenomena, levitation of the witness or of objects and animals in the vicinity, maneuvers over UAP appearing to anticipate the witness's thoughts, premonitory dreams or visions, personality changes promoting unusual abilities in the witness, and healing. So interesting stuff there. That's the psychic. So that's layer 5. And then layer 6, the sixth category could be called cultural. All right, this is also very interesting to me. It is concerned with society's reactions to the reports, the way in which secondary effects, hoaxes, fiction, and science fiction, imagery, scientific theories, cover-up or exposure, media censorship, or publicity become generated, and the attitude of members of a given culture towards the concepts that UAP observations appear to challenge. The greatest impact, listen to this, the greatest impact of the phenomenon has been on general acceptance of the idea of life in space and a more limited but potentially very significant change in the popular concept of non-human intelligence. This is what they argue. So Valle and Davis, he argues the greatest impact of the phenomenon has been on humanity's general acceptance of the idea of life in space. That's been the biggest change. And a more limited but potentially very significant change in the popular concept of non-human intelligence. Jacques Vallée, in 2003 at least, says, what is the UAP technology? What is it? What could it be? So he says, a framework for scientific hypothesis on the UAP observations can be built on the identification of the 6 major layers of UAP effects. Okay, so if we use the 6 layers as a framework, and we must formulate a view of the problem in a single statement at this point, so 2003, that statement will be, everything works as if UAPs were the product of a technology that integrates physical and psychic phenomena and primarily affects cultural variables in our society through manipulation of physiological and psychological parameters in the witnesses. Now look at this. That's what he says, insane. Everything works as if UAP were the product of a technology that integrates physical and psychic phenomena. Okay, so it's a technology. It integrates physical with psychic phenomena. Why? In order to affect cultural variables in human society. Okay, so it's affecting cultural variables through manipulation of physiological and psychological parameters in the witnesses. So it does that, right? This technology, UAP technology, uses physical and psychic phenomena to manipulate witnesses physiologically and psychologically. Why? To induce some effect in our society, in human society. All right, it seems insane to me, but that's bold, man. He's saying it. This single statement can be developed as follows, okay? The phenomenon is the product of a technology. He says it is a thing, okay? It's not some weird effect. During the observation, the UAP is a real physical material object. However, it appears to use either very clever deception or very advanced physical principles, resulting in the effects we have called anti-physical, which must eventually be reconciled with the laws of physics. Okay, so Valle and Davis here, they say that UAPs are real. The layer 2, those weird effects we're seeing, is some very clever deception or advanced physical principles. B, okay? The technology triggers psychic effects either purposely or as a side effect of its manifestations. These consciousness phenomena are now too common to be ignored or relegated to the category of exaggerated or ill-observed facts. All of us who have investigated close-range sightings have become familiar with these effects. Very interesting, okay? So he says all the woo, the stuff that people say is too woo, they don't want to listen to, weird psychic effects, all this strange stuff, consciousness phenomena, as he calls it, is way too common to be ignored. Okay, so he says it's common, and it sounds like there's consistency, okay, is what I get from that. Okay, so all of us who have investigated close-range sightings have become familiar with these effects. So he's saying you can't throw out the woo. And then C, the purpose of this technology may be cultural manipulation, possibly but not necessarily under control of a form of non-human intelligence, in which case the physiological and psychological effects are a means to that end. Okay, so he says it could be cultural manipulation, possibly but not ET, okay, in which case the physiological and psychological effects are a means to that end. But the parapsychologist with a Jungian framework may argue that the human collective unconscious is also a potential source of such effects without the need to invoke alien intervention. Okay, so what he's saying is these consciousness phenomena that he's talking to, right? could be from human. There's no reason to assume that it's extraterrestrial in nature. It could be from human consciousness, some weird effect of our own humanism. That's great, man. Right there, he says what it is. That's amazing. All right, the incommensurability problem, I'll just touch briefly on this, is basically, this says here, the view that ETs and humans may have such divergent views of conceptualizing the world that there can be no mutual understanding is referred to as the incommensurability problem in the SETI literature. Okay, so this is, we're just so different from the phenomena, right? Or everything about us that we just can't understand their communication messages. Okay, so they're communicating, but we just can't tell what it is. We cannot physically understand it. It comes across as absurd and these crazy high strangeness events. He mentions semiotics. Semiotics is basically that understanding of icons. How do we communicate? It's basically a communication problem. Is semiotics is we're so different we can't even understand their icons. So the messages they're sending we're just not receiving. All right, and finally the UAP and abduction problem. So he does mention here the aforementioned behavior of UAP is not fundamentally absurd. That's what he says. This apparent absurdity is merely a reflection of the cognitive mismatch or the incommensurability problem that exists between humans and the phenomena. In this particular case, UAP are sending the message and we are the recipients, okay? But we're not understanding those messages. So basically he's saying it's all this crazy stuff going on is just a cognitive mismatch, or just we're so different we cannot receive their messages. Okay, finally, for the conclusion, okay, modern engineering has made us familiar with display technologies that produce three-dimensional images with color, motion, and perspective through physical devices. We speculate that UAP are analogous to these display technologies, but utilize a wider range of variables to operate on the percipients and through them on human culture. Okay, so he says right here that UAP are using advanced technologies similar to what we would call TV screens, right? But much more advanced, obviously, to actually affect human culture. The long time scale and the global nature of the effects make it difficult to test hypotheses involving such cultural effects. So that's what he says. That's the actual intent of UAPs, is to affect human culture for some reason over a long time scale and a global nature. So it makes it very difficult for us to actually study it. Okay, so how can we study? Let's see. He says, the question then becomes, to what extent are these effects evidence of a purposeful action of the operators? To answer this question, and to test more fully the hypothesis that UAP phenomena are both physical and psychic in nature, we need much better investigations, a greater upgrading of data quality, and a more informed analysis not only of the object being described, of the UAPs, but also of the impact of the observation on the witnesses and their social environment. Okay, so three things there. What do we need? We need better investigations. Okay, so more serious investigation, less biased is what he's talking about. Remove the bias. You have to look at the woo, and you have to look at the nuts and bolts if you're on the woo side. Okay, you got to look at everything. A great upgrading of data quality, so better data. Okay, so that's the whole point of UAP Society. Make it open source. Try and get better data, better analysis. And that way we can get a more informed analysis, not only on the UAPs, okay, everybody's looking at the UAPs, but also on the impact of the observation on the witnesses and their social environment, okay, because he says that is the actual goal of these UAPs, or their actual effects is affecting human culture, man. Very interesting. This study blew my mind. Hope you guys learned something from it. Please smash that like button if you did like this. Subscribe so you get notifications when I release videos, at least every Friday. Come to UAP Society. Help us get better data. Okay, so link in the description. And as always, thanks to my patrons. Love you guys. Thanks for all your support. If you want to become a patron, support my channel, and get behind the scenes access and live streams, then go to patreon.com/Chris Lado. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. Thanks for being here. Have a great week. Peace.